you know, we have to stay woke. Like, everybody needs to be woke. And you can talk about if you're the wokest or woker, but just stay more woke than less woke.
Yeah.
But how does a Jewish person vote for a Democrat? How does a Catholic person vote for a Democrat? With what they're doing to Catholics, I just don't get it. Somebody doesn't like Catholics in that administration, and I don't even know who it is. I don't think it's Biden, because I don't think he has any idea what the hell he's doing. I don't think he has any ideas on any subject. Kamala Harris supports California's outrageous new law trampling on parental rights and allowing minors to change their gender without parental notification or consent. Can you imagine? She's in favor of that, by the way. Or she was. She's probably losing. You know, they're losing as much as they can. But remember, a politician always goes back to where they started. Harris wants to forcibly compel doctors and nurses against their will to give chemical castration drugs to young children. You know that, right? She totally supports that. And she supports the Biden-Harris Title IX policy of forcing every public school in America to let men into women's and girls' locker rooms. Can you imagine? It's like, what are we doing? What? You know, the whole world is laughing at us. You do know that, right? We've gone wacko. As president, I will protect the safety and well-being of America's children. I will defend the values of the American family. And above all, I will restore common sense to Washington, D.C.
You frequently use the term woke, and you recently said that the word means different things to different people. What does it mean to you?
Woke is a form of cultural Marxism. It's about taking individuality, merit, and achievement and subordinating that to a political agenda based on identity politics. It is effectively displacing the truth in favor of ideology. And I think it's important that we fight against that, because our society does need to be rooted in truth. Don't tell me that a man can get pregnant and expect me to believe that. That is not true, and we can't govern our society based on things that are not true. Second, when that ideology takes hold of institutions, it corrodes the institutions and it produces bad results. For example, when you have woke overtake parts of the economy with things like ESG, they attack energy, they attack other things. The average person ends up poorer as a result of that. When woke overtakes education, you get indoctrination and students end up performing worse as a result of that. When you have ideological prosecutors get into office in cities like San Francisco, they stop prosecuting criminals. The inmates run the asylum. The average person ends up less safe as a result of that. Every jurisdiction in this country that has indulged in this type of leftism, city or state, has failed. How do I know that? Because people that are fleeing are coming to my state in Florida and they're telling me the story about it. So this is not just an academic debate. It's, do we want policy based on tried and true principles, enduring principles that have made our country great? Or are we going to go on some ideological joyride, let people out of prison, do this, do that, and see our quality of life be destroyed? Woke needs to die.
Judge Brindisi, should biological men be able to expose themselves to unwilling women, including underage girls?
Senator, that's not a view I share.
So your answer is no?
Senator, I want to be somewhat careful because there are a number of cases that are working.
Is your answer yes? You said that's not a view you share.
It's not.
Then why, just a moment ago, Senator Blackburn was asking you about, as a congressman, you were a congressman from 2019 to 2021.
That's correct.
You were original co-sponsor of and you voted for an Orwellian-named extreme piece of Democrat legislation called the Equality Act. The Equality Act mandated that biological men could play in women's sports, could go to women's bathrooms, could go to women's locker room. The women were not asked. The women were not asked if biological men could go into their locker rooms and disrobe with them. You sponsored it and voted for it. You just said a minute ago you didn't agree with men exposing them, that 6'2" man, to be incarcerated with women. Do you think the women in women's prisons have any right, and in particular a right not to be incarcerated, not to have a cellmate who is a 6'2" serial rapist?
Senator, I can assure you, if I become a district court judge, that I will follow the...
But my question is, do those women have any rights not to be incarcerated with a 6'2" biologically male serial rapist?
Senator, I think every person has the right to feel safe, and I can tell you...
Then why did you sponsor and vote for legislation that did not protect that right and violated that right? That did not protect that right and violated that right?
Senator, that was a time when I was a policymaker, and I do understand that there...
Okay, so those are your policy views. By the way, so do you have any regrets for sponsoring the Equality Act? You said apparently you didn't read the statute, you didn't know what it said. Do you have any regrets for sponsoring legislation that would force girls and women to be subjected to harassment from naked biological men? Do you have any regrets for that?
Senator, during my time being a legislator in the House of Representatives...
That's a yes or no?
I sponsored thousands of pieces of...
Okay, so you have no regrets about that. All right. In the remaining minute, I'm going to shift to Mr.
To start off, as a Secretary of Health and Human Services, can you define for this committee what is a man?
You're looking at one.
Great. So you are a man. I like that. Can you tell me, can men get pregnant?
Unless you know something I don't, I think the answer is pretty obvious.
What is that answer, sir?
I'm asking you, is there something you know that I don't know that would say that a man...
Well, I'm asking what you know. Can men get pregnant?
I'm not aware of it.
Okay. Well, Mr. Secretary, materials coming from your department, you've referred to mothers as birthing persons, replacing that title with...
Are mothers not persons?
Mothers are persons, but it seems to be more inclusive, like you're trying to include another gender in that.
I'm all about inclusion, Congresswoman.
There you go. Just as a mother of 4 boys, I'm not necessarily offended at that. I am a person, but it's just unscientific and absurd.
How so?
To include men in that, if you're going to be inclusive, if you're going to be inclusive in birthing persons, yes.
Well, but it seems to me that you're trying to define the term.
Reclaiming my time. Can men get pregnant? So then we don't need to include them in this. Mothers are mothers. Moving forward, Mr. Secretary, I want to read for you from a document from your office, the Office of Population Affairs. It says in here, and I quote, "Gender-affirming care encompasses many facets of healthcare needs and support. It has been shown to increase positive outcomes for transgender and non-binary children." Mr. Secretary, what is a transgender child?
A child in America is a child in America, and I hope you and I can love that child just as much as...
Can you define what a transgender child is?
That's a child in America, and it's an American citizen child who needs the services and love just the way any other child does.
Mr. Secretary, do you believe that a child is capable of making life-altering decisions to maim themselves?
So let me just say to you that I don't agree with your premise, but what I will say to you is children know much about themselves, and with the help of their...
Do you believe that children are capable of making the decision to self-regulate?
Again, I don't necessarily accept the premise of your question.
Mr. Secretary, I mean, you have gender-affirming care for young people, so this is something that you have looked over...
I don't equate gender-affirming care to mutilation. So if that's where you're going, then you're not going to get the answer you want.
My amendment, I'm asking the House to support, strikes the funding for the Office of Resolution Management, Diversity, and Inclusion. The Office of Resolution Management, Diversity, and Inclusion in the VA is charged with promoting woke DEI initiatives. My amendment would strike over $86 million of funding for this woke office, which provides trainings for VA employees to teach them about their implicit bias. Just for you to understand what implicit bias means, because it was something I had to look up myself, it is described in ACORN. Implicit bias refers to a person's unconscious attitudes about other communities that can affect their behavior to those members. Unconscious attitudes, we are funding $86 million for people to be trained about things they feel that they don't know they
deserve equitable and fair access to the health care and benefits that they have earned. Diversity.
So we don't have to spend $86 million on educating everyone on how different they are. It's time to start treating everyone equal. As far as sexual harassment claims, private businesses all over the country are able to handle these without having special diversity, equity, and inclusion departments to handle sexual harassment. That's usually handled in human resources or among managers that can handle the situation. Management has always been a problem in the VA. We do not need to fund $86 million creating a big woke department that is actually already created. We should spend $86 million again towards helping our veterans. Our veterans have enough issues they faced. Not too long ago, there was a tragic story in Georgia where one of our veterans committed suicide while waiting for the care in the waiting office at the VA. This should never, ever happen. This type of funding, $86 million, again, should not go towards educating people about gender and gender bias, educating people about their skin color, educating people about how they think unconsciously without knowing how they think. These are the type of woke ideologies that divide and separate Americans, and veterans could care less about. They care about the care that they receive. They care about having their appointments. They care about their medical treatment. And they care about one another. And one of the things veterans care most about is the fact that they suffer with PTSD from all the foreign wars that they have been sent to and served in. It's time we take better care of our veterans and stop dividing America with identity politics.
Grassley asked you a very simple question, why you would sic the National Security Division of the Department of Justice on parents. John Cornyn asked you the same thing. You said it wasn't in your October 4th memorandum, it was in another office's memorandum. It wasn't another office's memorandum, Judge. It was in a press release from your office, right here in front of me, October 4th, 2021, for immediate release. You're going to create a task force that includes the National Security Division. What on earth does the National Security Division have to do with parents who are expressing disagreements at school boards?
Nothing in this memorandum or any memorandum is about parents expressing disagreements with their school boards. The memorandum makes clear that parents are entitled and protected by the First Amendment to have vigorous debates. We don't, the Justice Department is not interested in that question at all. It is
okay, so even in that case, what is the National Security Division, Judge? These are the people that are supposed to be chasing jihadists and Chinese spies. What does the National Security Division have to do with parents at school boards?
This is not, again, about parents at school boards. This is about threats of violence.
Okay, let me turn to that, because you've said that phrase repeatedly throughout the morning. Threats or violence and threats of violence. Violence and threats of violence. Yeah. We've heard it a dozen times this morning. As Senator Lee pointed out, the very first line in your October 4th memorandum refers to harassment and intimidation. Why do you continue to dissemble in front of this committee that you are only talking about violence and threats of violence when your memo says harassment and intimidation?
Senator, I said in my testimony that it involved other kinds of criminal conduct, and I explained to Senator Lee that the statutory definitions of those terms and the constitutional definitions of those terms involve threats of violence.
Okay, let's look at one of those statutes you cited. Yeah. Section 223. Yeah. That statute covers the use of not just telephones but telecommunications devices to annoy someone. So are you going to sic your U.S. attorneys and the FBI on a parents group if they post on Facebook something that annoys a school board member, Judge?
The answer to that is no, and the provision that I was particularly drawing to his attention was 2261A, which was to engage in...
I wasn't talking about 2261A. I know you mentioned that. You also mentioned 223. That's what I mentioned. Yeah. Judge, you also told Senator Klobuchar that this memorandum was about meetings and coordination. Yeah. Meetings and coordination. Yeah. Well, I have in my hand right here that I'll submit to the record a letter from one of your U.S. attorneys to all of the county attorneys, to the attorney general, to all sheriffs, to the school board association of his state, in which he talks about federal investigation and prosecution. It's not about meetings, it's not about coordination, it's about federal investigation and prosecution. Did you direct your U.S. attorneys to issue such a letter?
I did not. I have not seen that letter.
It's got 3 pages. It's got 3 pages of spreadsheet about all the federal crimes that a parent could be charged with, to include the ones you cited. Did Maine Justice make this spreadsheet, Judge?
I don't have any idea. My memorandum speaks specifically about setting up meetings.
That refers to Scott Smith, whose 15-year-old daughter was raped. She was raped in a bathroom by a boy wearing girls' clothes, and the Loudoun County School Board covered it up because it would have interfered with their transgendered policy during Pride Month. And that man, Scott Smith, because he went to a school board and tried to defend his daughter's rights, was condemned internationally. Do you apologize to Scott Smith and his 15-year-old daughter, Judge?
Senator, anyone whose child was is the most horrific crime I can imagine, and is certainly entitled and protected by the First Amendment to protest to their school board about this.
But he was cited by the School Board Association as a domestic terrorist, which we now know that letter and those reports were the basis for your...
Senator,
this is
that's wrong.
shameful. Judge, this is shameful. This testimony